set in stone yet. Now, I'll start with you, Honorable Gakuye. What do you make of this article and its assertion that there seems to be a delay in finding a formidable force that would go against, or rather actually be leveled on the same level with the Deputy President?
Thank you, Trix. Allow me to salute the viewers wherever they are watching us from. Coming to the matter on the headlines, it is obvious and very true that this is a game of politics. And for a number of time, we have seen what we call a blame game in the NASA fraternity. Yeah. Some are trying to tell us that NASA cannot be rebuilt again. It cannot be a vessel to take them to the next election. And we have seen two camps. One camp which is calling itself OCA. OCA comprises the Mudavadi, Kalonzo, Gidemoi, and Wetangula. And we have seen now another alliance of Jubilee Party and ODM. And at this particular point, it is not very clear at what time and at what point the two will merge together. So still, this is an element where tricks you can find. You'll find a situation where there is what we call water and paraffin that majorly cannot be able to mix. You just find that actually, if it is paraffin, it will just appear at the top and the water down, or water up, and that is the game here. And the blame game here is that most of those who founded NASA are totally uncomfortable with the manner in which the ODM as a party treated them in the last 5 good years. And you find that there is a situation where there is what we call party fundings from the government, where they are saying they have not received any single penny, and the enjoyment of that particular funds has been under one single roof of one party. Yes. And therefore, that has been a tag. And still, I don't believe that, in fact, these guys will meet together if still Raila will insist to be in the ballot. But if the Raila changes the tact and at least soften his heart and allow himself to support one of these team, a gentleman amongst the rest, yes, I think working together can be realized. But any other choice against that is not most likely going to happen, because it is, yes, like there are 2 previous elections where there was an assurity that Raila will go 1 term. And that memorandum is still there, yeah, and wrote at the party registrar. But it has never been honored. And I am not very sure that Raila is ready to back them. So still there is a big tag ahead, and we will just wait to see. Because by December, all these vessels will have shifted. And the head of state seems to be the one who is trying to whip them together and bring them on one roof, which to me, I believe will be either possible or impossible. It carries the 70% no, but 30% yes.
Okay. Yes. And today, the One Kenya Alliance that you have mentioned will meet to receive advice from a technical team on perhaps, among other issues, modalities for picking a presidential candidate. Mr. Mwakesi, if you were to sit in on that meeting, what advice would you give them?
Good morning, Trix. Good morning, Kenyans. I wish Eid Mubarak to all the Muslim brothers and sisters. I think the One Kenya Alliance is going to be one vessel that we are yet to see if it will ever mature or if it will ever come into fruition. I know they set up this technical team. They have been at it for about a week and a half now. And this is going to be the do or die, tell-all moment of whether the alliance will take shape or not. As it was rightly mentioned, the key problem for them has been how to pick a singular presidential candidate. But from what I do understand and what has been well put out by the people involved, this being especially Mudavadi, Kalonzo, that they are interested to be flag bearers come 2022, whether they agree or they don't. And for me, this will be surely something that might actually kill a lot of political careers going forward, because a lot of them are being pushed by their people to to actually not back down from being the presidential flag bearers. Senator Mutula Kilonzo yesterday was very quick to remark that it is obvious that there are going to be 3 people on the ballot, and that's Raila, Mudavadi, and Kalonzo, and I fully agree with that. And once that happens, I can assure you,
Do you
William
really think
Ruto,
Kalonzo Musyoka would go at it alone?
he will, and I don't believe that he will become anybody serious going forward if he does not put his foot forward as a presidential candidate. Everybody right now, there's a mantra that keeps saying that Kalonzo has become Raila Niwachie candidate. So he has to put his foot forward and actually be on the ballot once again, so that he can actually bring together and show that he's actually a candidate of note.
Yeah.
I think the only thing that has been totally bogging them down was the fact that the president has been warming up to all of them, giving them assurances that they all could potentially be inheritors to the throne. I think this is the one fallacy that William Ruto refused to believe in, and he decided that he cannot wait to be crowned. And he went ahead and decided that he's going to forge forward and become his own man. And as you can tell from the past 2 weeks, Raila Odinga has not been mincing his words.
Yeah.
He's been putting forward his manifesto, clearly stating that he is ready and going for this particular seat. So I believe if they're going to have this One Kenya Alliance meeting and not be alive to the fact that the train has left the station and anyone who is going to be serious in this election is already moving forward and setting forward their campaign strategy and their campaign messaging, then it will be time lost for them. So if they're going to take this technical report and waste time on it, I think One Kenya Alliance will be one of those alliances that were good on the paper, but not practical on ground.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, this article also asserts that the deputy president is taking advantage of the lack of a clear candidate and, of course, making gains politically by making moves while they still struggle to figure it out. Honorable Gakuya, do you agree with that assertion?
Tracks one thing that political perception is a very simple thing, that you only require to be ahead of the others and with a very calculated moves. And the manner in which the deputy president is strategizing himself is on a methodology that if these guys are not going to have a solution quickly, they will just fight themselves off guard, because at least they'll be the time is not up and not up for them. And come by December, I am not finding a solution out of this. And taking into consideration that actually we are only 4 months to December.
Yes.
By December, any single coalition that will not be formidable and concluded coalition, count it not to be there.
Okay.
And to my view is that Raila is still a candidate, and the move you have seen him now moving out and started campaigning, that's an indicator that he's very ready for it.
Yeah.
Therefore, it's upon for the rest of the team to decide whether to make their team formidable, and at least within themselves, they just unite and anoint one of their own, so that at least themselves they can come up also with their candidate. But just crying there and they are not taking shapes, I am finding them to be found off time. And I am considering that, taking into consider that also a presidential campaign requires heavyweight, this is money.
Yeah.
I still believe that, in fact, these guys, with the help of Gideon Moi, they can still propel themselves.
Okay.
Because at least he can be a strong financier of the team. And if they can decide, yes, let us give Moi a chance, I think that's okay. But to me...
Why did you laugh as you said that?
No, one thing is that, in fact, that the knowledge of Carozo must be in the ballot. The knowledge that Musalia must be in the ballot. And the knowledge that the Moi has to be on the ballot. This is, to me, a side issue. Because it can't give more. Then what is the essence of the coalition?
Yes.
I believe the essence of coalition is to come together, unite together, bring that solidness, and have one person out of you who can propel your campaign, and the rest becomes the wings.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, if what Honorable Gakuya is saying, Stephen, is anything to go by, then Raila Odinga is the obvious candidate, and now it's just a question of what it would take to galvanize support from all these other players. What do you think, if that is the case, it would take for Raila to ensure that he gets support from this, because he needs it, obviously?
I think from where Raila sits and his strategist is that they believe they can actually be able to marshal support across the country without necessarily having to go through these former gatekeepers.
Okay.
And I think the only mistake that the Mudavadi and Kalonzo made, and even Gideon Moi, during all this time when there was a lull and peacefulness, was not to go out there and actually sell themselves as national leaders. They're struggling to do that right now. Yeah. They failed also to make the viability of Raila Odinga's bid to look impossible. It was only left to William Ruto to deal with Raila Odinga. But it seems Raila Odinga still believes he's still strong enough, and he can go without these individuals. But I think Raila Odinga's key thing and momentum that he's trying to do is what he has done before in previous coalition-making processes. Raila Odinga always goes ahead of the pack, goes and solidifies his base, and by the time they come in for a negotiation, he looks like the stronger and a bigger candidate. And this is what he's trying to do, because he's very sure he wouldn't be able to go against William Ruto without an alliance. But the fatigue from the other alliance members from before is showing. Most of these parties, by the way, have already made resolutions to exit from NASA formally. It's just a matter of wait and see to see whether they can be able to bolt out. Raila is busy trying to get the office of the Registrar of Political Parties to come into a way of resolving the dispute about sharing of the party's money to try and appease these party leaders. But I think time is not on everyone's side, and I think for Raila, the only thing that he has now is go directly to the people, make his case, and not wait for, so that by the time we reach December or January of next year, anybody who feels that they cannot be able to mount a sufficient campaign against William Ruto will have no option but to follow him. So I think he's bolting out so that he can let the others catch up with him later on.
Okay, and that is it, the political portion of at least Press Review. We're going to dig deeper into more politics on the others in the next hour of the program. But as I scan through the front page of the Daily Nation, a very important issue is coming up. Of course, an unfortunate incident in Vihiga, unwanted children of Vihiga, and that has to do with incest. You can buy the paper and find out more about that. But we're talking about the economy. We're told surviving rising cost of living in today's Kenya. Now, data from the Kenya National Bureau of Statistics paints a picture of the pain of Kenyans as they watch their shrinking shopping baskets. Prices of basic commodities and services have shot up in the last 12 months only. And they're also actually going down to actually give you the price differences and their increase. For example, Sukuma wiki has gone up by 2 shillings, in watermelon 6, spinach 3, matumbo 23. We have cooking fat 17, beef has gone up by 36, and of course Irish potatoes, tomatoes, electricity, a big one there, gone up by 116. Now, what do you make of this, Honorable Gakuya? And as you see the pain that Kenyans are going through, do you think this is going to affect how they vote in the upcoming polls?
One thing, Trix, is that Kenyans are totally different people. Once they come to what we call ballots, they consider many factors. And you may find that, in fact, this factor of difficult livelihood may not become a factor once we come to the ballot. Because you realize the people will team up with what we call regions, what we call community-based, and this kind of kingmanship, and totally lose the main element of their own rights in terms of fighting for issues to do with their livelihood. In this particular case, I can tell you it is very clear that Kenyans are walking a very tight route, because their basis of income are not changing. They are they are totally getting worse every other day, and but the livelihood still gets high every other takes high stake every other day, and you realize that when the fuel prices goes a notch higher, that tells you the lives becomes costly. Every other prices are up, because it's like the fuel controls most of our commodities prices, because all our commodities that we normally consume does reach our destinations through transportation, because these things are coming either from the port of Mombasa, others are coming from the farms, and they must require transportation of vehicles. Those vehicles, where they consume diesel and petrol, and when these fuels comes up, don't expect that the extra charges are going to the owners of the vehicles. Yeah. The extra charge is just pinned to the last consumer, and therefore the last consumer is the one who will bear that cost, and therefore that is how the life is totally becomes difficult. And it is true, tricks, that if you compare what is happening, including a kilogram of sukuma wiki, which is now nearly almost 70 shillings, it tells you then anybody who earns 200 shillings a day will be on a very critical corner to survive in this country, because it can only be able to make what we can call a meal of a day, and not 2 meals a day, just a single meal a day. And that is going to be very tricky. So at this particular point, what I would say is that the government, as a government of the people, because our government is not a military government, it's a civilian elected government. Yeah. I think the most critical point here is to feel mercy of your people, because you are just there not for any other purpose but to protect and to uphold. You cannot tell us when the people are crying down there and you are still keeping on overtaxing them daily, and you are not considering that they are really feeling any single burden, then it tells you that you have forgotten those who put yourself into that position. In this case, I am telling you the taxes in this country are too high, and I am telling you they are unbearable. And unless we do something, it is totally. And let's compare the budget we are in. We are talking about a budget of 3.6 trillion, where more than 1.6 trillion is going to be harnessed from borrowing, and this is internally and externally. Don't expect lives to go super any soon. But if the government is a government feeling and considering the suffering of the common monarchy, I think the best route to take is just from the point of making budget. Don't give Kenyans budget that is too extraordinary, that you are aware you cannot be able to fund it without it overtaxing them. So that just be realistic and make sure that actually within your planning you consider what you can be able to handle without necessarily giving those extraordinary kind of budgets that Kenyans themselves will try to carry and fail. Because I am totally telling you, out of 3.6 trillion budget that we have, we will be only be able to implement something to do with the 2.5 trillion, but the rest of a trillion will spill to the next financial year without have been settled, or any single project have. But why do we have to have all this drama? Because we can fix ourselves right from the beginning of our planning. And when we come to budgeting process, then we budget what we know we can afford within ourselves.
Indeed. And the prices, of course, shot up after the end of the COVID tax reliefs, and then piled on top of that was the new taxes. Mr. Mwakesi, don't you think it's unfortunate that we do not factor in these difficulties when we're choosing our leaders, because they are the ones that fail to plan, as Honorable Gakuya has said, and then we are the ones who have to pay for it later on?
You know, Trix, we are at a time whereby we had our parliament be put in a very precarious situation whereby it was acting always at the whims of the national government. In fact, if it wasn't for the clamor and complaints of Kenyans right before the passage of this last budget, a lot of the items would have still been appearing in our budget taxation, and Kenyans would be suffering more. The one thing that we've been complaining about was the price of cooking gas, and it has shot up tremendously. And it seems nobody wants to listen to the cry of the common Mwananchi, because on one hand the government is telling Mwananchi, leave firewood, leave all these other things, go into cooking gas, and then at the same time you decide that you're going to tax this thing to a position whereby most people right now are finding it very difficult even to cook basic meals at home. I think the bigger problem that we've had in this nation is to have the Jubilee administration in its last term not being very considerate to the needs of Mwananchi. Mwananchi has been very clear that all they want is to put food on their table. And I can assure you, by the fact that the government has not been listening, especially to the issue of fuel and how it affects our commodity prices, is a big, big, big indictment on that administration and its capacity to be able to cater for the needs of Mwananchi. Like Honorable Gakuya said, one of the biggest contributors to these high food prices has been the cost of transportation. And this thing is really hammering farmers to the point of whereby farmers who are doing farming and are meant to supply to just near towns like Thika, you're farming in Limuru and you're taking it to Thika, just the cost of transporting those items makes sure that even your margins do not become sustainable. We have a big problem also again with the issue of making sure that our farmers are getting access to credit.
Yes.
Over the last few months, it's been impossible for any small-scale farmer or producer to be able to access credit readily from our banks. And this is a great, great, great cause for concern. I think it's important that going forward, the government sits down with the private sector, finds modalities of availing a lot more monies for the credit of this economy. Because right now, every single businessman that I know is having a very, very difficult time trying to manage and keeping their books balanced and even to be able to cater for the expenses that they have. So I think it is more important that the little things that were done in terms of cushioning Kenyans ahead of during the COVID pandemic, whereby you cut down on VAT, you cut down on certain duties that were being charged. This measure should have been put in place and retained. I think the one thing also the Jubilee administration should have really focused on was to cut down on the massive infrastructure projects that were being put there.
Right.
Because I do not see the reason why we are spending a lot more on this last financial year on infrastructure, yet we have over 300, almost 900 billion in pending bills which have not been paid to suppliers.
But here's the thing, when you look at President Kibaki's regime, he also initiated massive infrastructural development projects, but we never saw this happening.
Yes.
What gives? And
this is the thing, you know, this I've already discussed it before, that President Kibaki took us on a new flight of infrastructure projects, and Jubilee administration also took over from that. He finished the Thika Superhighway. President Uhuru Kenyatta went on and really opened up our road network. But it comes a point whereby you can say, I can be able to complete these infrastructure projects and leave the next to the next presidency, so that I focus on, because infrastructure projects are heavy on the government revenues. And so you'd have to create a balance. There comes a point whereby you need to stop and then say, now, let me focus on the social issues. Let me focus on making sure the economy is spurred. But I have learned from this administration that it is on a need to secure a legacy built by using brick and mortar. Creating a legacy built on brick and mortar, and yet Mwananchi is going to remember you for having spent the last 2 years of your administration suffering in hunger, not being able to pay bills, and in serious debt, will not really make Kenyans to be feeling that your presidency amounted to anything to them. And this is why you're finding that to distinguish themselves from Uhuru Kenyatta, both Raila and the Deputy President William Ruto have decided that our focus will be on Mwananchi. And that is why the bottom-up approach and the hustler conversation is making any sense.
Yeah.
Because it seems that for the last 8 years, Mwananchi was forgotten and the focus was on building railways, building ports, building things that have no direct correlation, especially with how Mwananchi puts food on their table.
Yes.
And this is the conversation that needs to change. I think on my part, if I was to advise the president going through the last few months of his administration, he has one more supplementary budget he can be able to utilize. It would be better if he focused now on creating, stimulating the economy through measures that will allow Mwananchi throughout the last dying months of his administration to remember that at least they got to feed themselves, they got to survive, they got to live an extra day. But at the current situation, this idea of just saying that we built a highway from here to nowhere and we built Lamu Port and we did all these things, they are rosy on newspapers, but they are not real for Mwananchi.
Now, Mr. Mwakesi, one would argue, and I do believe the president has hinted at this, that the legacy that he is trying to seek is for future generations. So these are long-term benefits that shall be enjoyed, perhaps not even by this generation of Kenyans, but the next and many others to come. What do you say about that?
You know, all this is beautiful, and nobody contests that most of these infrastructure projects, we will find their value going forward. I mean, for some of us, it has really improved even our ability to do trade in different commodities. But what we're saying is that in as much as you're trying to open up the economy through infrastructure, you have to also balance it out, because the same cow that you want to milk, you're not feeding it. There is no way it will be able to create the products that you require to continue building on your legacy projects.
Okay.
Now, this Mwananchi, if he's not able to generate monies to feed his families, and they will find no reason and no value for having to see a road that will be eaten by their great-grandchildren, while right now they're dying of hunger. We might not even have the kids to enjoy those roads.
Okay.
Yeah.
Honorable Gakuya, well, given what Mr. Mwakesi has said, do you sense, whether it's the former Prime Minister Raila Odinga or the Deputy President William Ruto, do you sense a sincerity in them trying to fight for the common Mwananchi as they set up their election, pre-election agenda? Do you think these are things that they will actually go and fulfill if Mwananchi chooses to vote either candidate in? Well, Raila Odinga is not a candidate, but either of the politicians in, if they buy into the idea that we are fighting for you in the coming administration?
Thank you, Trix. My view to this is that our readers has not been trustworthy. They give us what you call very good and very beautiful ideologies.
Yes.
Book prints that contains a lot of goodies, a lot of carrots. But finally, you found ourselves lost. Because I remember Jubilee, in its first platform, it was campaigning for what we call double-digit economy.
Yeah.
My simple question is, where did this got lost? Because one, you came into power, you found already structures well set. Because Kibaki did the best. Because Kibaki found a country without structures, and he collected and made the structures working.
Yes.
So these guys were only there to take the pilot ship, because Kibaki just stepped out, and theirs was just to pick on, because and start to the pilot position, and then the plane get off. But we found that, in fact, this has not materialized. And I realized that by the time we are heading to what we call the conclusion of the 2017 election, in the second Maraga's presidential election, you realize the country was totally crippling, and our economy was totally in shambles. And I can tell you, it is by good luck that Raila Odinga at least softened his heart.
Yeah.
And at least he made a handshake. That handshake to me was a golden. Because purely in terms of the country to start now new phase of generating, it was purely that peacefulness. Because a country that is not peaceful it is not very easy to harness what we call resources in a better way. Mm-hmm. But when the country is in a sober mood and the country is what we call tempers of politics are toned down,
yes.
I think the economy to thrill becomes easier. In this particular case, I would say our present and the previous president, mm-hmm. I can only take a tick to Kibaki, who performed so tremendously. And if the team that succeeded him actually moved to his vision, I don't find where we got lost. Mm-hmm. Because Kibaki left this country with what we call loans, which were less than 2 trillion. But just imagine, with less than 8 years, mm-hmm. we are now nearing 9 trillion. We are now off about 8 trillion loans. Mm-hmm. It tells you that this government is not factoring any single development out of their savings. They just depend with borrowing money to do any single project that actually is a national project. Right. But my biggest question is, mm-hmm. at what point, because here you have finished Mwananchi wa Kawaida. He's totally down mm-hmm. economically. Mm-hmm. You are not putting any measures on how to uplift him up. How he can be able to also assist you in what we call bringing or harnessing these resources into one basket. So if MSMEs are dead, all over, because this particular pandemic has totally lost their jobs. And nobody is thinking about that particular sector. Mm-hmm. What miracle are you expecting to generate economy of 3.6 trillion without these people? Then it tells you that the people are on their own.
Yeah.
And a government of that kind, surely, is a government which is not keen on the living of their people. And let me tell you, even though, and my panelists has stated very clearly, yeah. even though you buy me airports, you do what you call